Hello, we are on episode 17 of Werewolf the podcast, and this one is called Killing the Killer of the Killers, and it's about a job I did for the British Army. Yes, I am a werewolf currently working for the British Army. The job was in the beautiful city of Berlin, following my mark. That's professionalese for my target down into the subway system. It was about 2:30 p.m. on a bright autumnal day in early October, and the city was, well, it's beautiful, to be honest. My posse and I had been following him for some time. I would need the man to realise that he was being chased for this particular plan to work. Yes, I don't know why either. This was a need-to-know thing, so I assumed that it was because I didn't need to know. It had taken him quite a while to notice me, but once he knew that he was being followed, he'd done all the usual steps to try and lose the tail. In fact, he felt he'd been successful as he lost me completely and was busy on the phone with his handler trying to decide whether or not to go ahead with the task he'd been set. Maybe that was it. Maybe my bosses had to have him phone someone so they could trace it or something. I don't know. Who gave a shit anyway? I would get to kill him. That was the main thing. The rest of it was just dull, and for those who like plans and things, I like the nitty-gritty of doing people and things. The thing is, as you know, I did not need to see him. I had my posit, who could do the following without the target having any idea. The posit would be walking next to him and giving me feedback on his location as the guy did all he could to evade me. The posit was a homing beacon for me. I could always sense where he was and find him. We were linked by telepathic GPS and shit. On top of that, I did not need to see the guy because I could also follow the stench path he left. Once I could recognise his odour, I could follow him anywhere. I'd smelt the jacket that he'd ditched in the bin at his first opportunity to evade me, and now I did not need to keep him in view to follow him. He left his own personal colour trail as a perfect track for me to follow in odour, and he also had deposits sat on his heels looking at the loser. This was really too easy. I would need to make it a little bit more difficult, or what was the point? The mark was a Kyle Porter, once an American Special Forces tactical whatever, an ace sniper, etc., blah blah blah, whatever, the best of the best, yada yada, you know, the usual macho bullshit nonsense. Had a purple hat and a blowjob from the Admiral or other reward for killing unknowing Afghanis from a mile away with a big gun. These guys think they are the bollocks and fight for their country and God bless America and all that. I always love meeting, greeting and sometimes eating these super macho characters, these so-called supermen. It's amazing how their spirits and macho ideals tend to change when they meet me for the first and, well, predominantly the last time. I was led to believe that this one was very good at his job and that he was on his way at this moment to take out his next target. The target was some Chinese business person that the British government had some kind of interest in or something. As usual, I was on a need-to-know basis. Well, need-to-know-ish. I actually did not give a shit if I knew it or not, to be honest. As I said before, I got to kill and torture with no fear of any consequences. In fact, I might get a purple-headed hard-on medal and a blowjob from the king for it. 1 or 2 up from Admiral, Kyle? Who knows? No, it's a Victoria Cross and a blowjob from King Charles in this. I'm not sure. It's far superior to an Admiral, I'm sure. The posit watched him as he spoke on his mobile. One softer line, and after a very rushed and harsh conversation, he stood to have a stress-relieving cigarette while deep in thought, and running his hands through his thick, dark hair as he contemplated. It took him some time and some soul-searching, but it seemed that he decided to continue with his task. I could sense that his confidence had grown and he must have felt happy at his success in kind of dropping me. My posit sniggered. Gotcha. Potsdamer Platz was unusually quiet for this time of the day. It was now 6:30 p.m. and getting dark. He descended to the subway level to embark on a journey across the city. He was obviously in a rush and not being too careful about anything. He boarded the train running towards Pankow, and I jumped onto the same subway a couple of carriages down from this. This was a risky bit where I could potentially lose him. I needed Posit's eyes on him to know where and when he would exit the train. I very carefully made my way through the carriages until I could see my Posit and be in a position where I could leave the train with them when they stepped off. Through the posit's eyes, I could see the man as though it was with my own eyes. As we get closer, my posit and I share our senses in a much stronger symbiosis. I could now literally taste the guy. We were so close. Posit sat in the gangway of the train, staring right into the eyes of the mark. It was cool to see this big, massive fuck-off wolf sit with his nose to the mark's nose. No one else could see him. Kyle sat calmly reading a book, looking relaxed and feeling pretty comfortable. Well, according to posit senses anyway. He was a real pro, this one. Obviously, he'd had extensive experience, which led him to being relaxed while working. He even yawned as he casually sat in his seat reading. I felt that he was overconfident, although his taste in books was pretty good. Stephen King's Cujo, nice and almost appropriate, well almost. 4 or 5 stations flew by, and then another American. You can smell them, they've got like a sweet cinnamon scent, climbed on board the train. He had a large duffel bag over his shoulder, which he removed to sit next to our boy Kyle. Nothing was said between them, but the man got off at the very next station without his bag. Once he'd gone, Kyle reached for it with a leg and dragged it along the ground and held it between his own knees. This must be the weapon he was going to use or something, or maybe he was just stealing the bag. I didn't really care. Let's face it, he got a bag thing. He waited in his seat at the next station until the last second, then rushed from the train just before the doors closed. I followed him as he went ahead. My posit kept him in view and I followed my posit on my internal GPS. This stuff was so simple when you had a posit. He had exited the train at Rosa Luxemburg Platz and had swung the bag over his left shoulder. It looked completely out of place when paired with the tailored suit that he wore. We tailed him as he made his way along the main road, eastward, following the street until he took a left at a turn, at a hotel that had a park across from it. After a couple of deep puffs, he put out another cigarette and entered the Soho House Hotel. God, that's difficult to say. Soho House Hotel. I quickly caught up with the posit. I'd asked him to wait and followed Kyle's scent trail to an elevator. Oops, that was a mistake. He could have got off at any floor. I'd held back my posit when I really should not have. I don't like being far from his comfort and security for long. It's not nice, but I'd messed up at this point. Now I wasted a lot of time by stopping the car at each level to find out where he'd left the lift. Finally, we found his scent trail. He got off at the very top of the hotel. Here was a bar with a pool which was closed off on the roof for repairs. A bit too much of a coincidence for my liking that this place would be free of people and things. Well, it would lead to fewer witnesses and stop me from creating all that collateral damage I like to create when I get a chance. If people died around a job, the government people kind of turned a blind eye, so I often extended my jollies to others where possible. His trail had led out of the door and onto the rooftop. The top of the hotel overlooked the park opposite, and he was kneeling, preparing his rifle to take a shot. Again, he showed he had expertise in his trade, as he had quickly and easily put together the weapon while smoking another stinky cigarette. I nodded at posit, and he went and stood next to the man so I could see the target that he was scoping. The rifle muzzle was pointed at a train of running people, and I could see that he was slowing his breathing and was ready to pull the trigger. I had to move fast, and in the blink of an eye I had crossed a few yards to the kneeling man. He had no time to react as I smashed his skull against the concrete parapet of the hotel, and his head exploded on contact with the block and showered me in brains and blood. He died instantly, but he'd still managed to pull the trigger, and the rifle fired as it fell. The bullet missed its target by a mosquito's penis. I continued my sprint and launched myself off the top of the building, absorbing posit as I fell to the road below. I landed in the centre of an unfortunate but fall-absorbing taxi in the middle of the street. By the time I'd caught my taxi, I was fully formed werewolf and made a superhero landing on the roof of the cab. This looked very cool, but had the downside of crushing all those that were inside the cab flat. Once I'd finished my movie moment pose, I continued my run through the panicking drivers towards the park. As I entered the park through its main gateway, running as fast as I could, people reacted with a momentary pause of disbelief, then panic would kick in, then lots of, running away and screaming. I continued to run down the path following the jogging target and managed to catch them on the last corner. I hit him from behind and eviscerated him with one long upstroke from a claw. I did that just to upset the chief, really. I knew I was not supposed to kill the man, but sometimes a werewolf has gotta do what it's gotta do. What a werewolf has gotta do is what they do. And as long as it's not you that I do, then it's fine. It's not as if they could give me a bollocking later, could they? His bodyguards reacted by drawing pistols, but I'd already moved on to the actual target when they had them in position. It was his assistant that I needed. My task had been to find the mole in the organisation, and now I had her. Just before the shot, she had blatantly pointed out the target for the shooter. I ran her down quickly. She had turned to look at me in her panic and had tripped and fallen to the floor, skinning her knees and palms on the tarmac of the path. Word of advice, never look back while running away. Although she would probably not get the chance to make this mistake again. I snatched her up from the ground with my left hand and continued down the path towards a road where a van sat with its back doors open. I leapt into the back with my prey and the doors slammed shut behind me. The engine gunned into life and the vehicle indicated out into traffic and smoothly drove off. The two soldiers in the back of the van could not get any further away from me. They were literally pinning their backs to the bulkhead that separated the cab from the rest of the vehicle. They knew what I was, but struggled to deal with what they saw. Dealing with the reality of me is something different. I looked at my tiny little Asian prize now as she sprawled in the back of the van. She had tears running from her pretty face and blood was evident from the places that I'd held her around the waist. I smiled at her with a wolfy smile and changed back to myself. This was probably much scarier in some ways as she'd been stared at by a naked, sweaty man. "Hey babe," I said. "Welcome to the horror show." Eventually the van swept into an underground car park and I got out now suited and booted. As I stepped from the vehicle I adjusted my tie in the car window. It looked good. I took my comb to do my hair but just had to smile as my hair was perfect already. Damn, I look good. Finally I adjusted my shirt cuffs as the hooded little lady was dragged most unceremoniously from the van into the boot of a waiting sedan that shot out the place with spinning tyres. The chief was waiting for me in a big black SUV by himself. Gosh, he was annoyed with me. Oh, how he yelled and shouted as we drove through the traffic back to the hotel. Apparently I'd caused an international incident and stuff. It would take years and all sorts of promises and gifts to sort it out. Fen and I giggled like naughty kids. Why the bloody hell did you do that? Why? God damn you, Will, why? Shouted the little purple-headed chief. Because I'm a werewolf, that's why. I'm a horrible creature. That's the end of that episode. Thank you very much. If you'd like to support the show, there is a link in the description below that says support the show, and that would be greatly enjoyed. You wonderful people. Thank you. Bye.